welcome everyone. This is Women Making Waves, the book club of the Grandmother Collective. And we have a really wonderful guest today named Sarah Corbett. Sarah and I met at actually what was it called? Solarize, a spiritual change maker conference about a year and a half ago, where we were on a group thinking about new longevity and what does it mean to age better and to kind of rethink what aging looks like. And I'm so delighted that as an author and actually she's just recently published a book that she'll tell us about. So this is her second book, that she's able to come and share with us about her work. And I'm going to hand it over to Sarah to open. I think she's got something she wants to read to us, and then she and I'll have a little discussion, and then we really would love to hear what people thought about her work or what they're thinking about in their own work. So, hi, Sarah.
Hi, Lindsay. Thanks so much for having me. It's so cool to finally be with the Grandmother Collective as well. I've been following your work, so it's nice to meet some of you. So thanks for having me. So shall I just say a bit about what craftivism and gentle craftivism is? And then I've got a little bit for my current book that it gives a good summary that I thought might just provoke some thought for some questions, and then we can dive into more of the detail of the methodology, the values, some of the actual projects and the impact they've had in different contexts. But this is a book club, so we want it to be as much a discussion as possible. So, some of you might know, so Dina might already know the word. I always say the word craftivism. You need to see it a little bit like the word punk. When you think of punk music, you've got all these different bands and artists, and they all sound and often look very different, but they're all under this umbrella because they've all got common ground of being DIY, being a certain type of music and certain types of values. And craftivism, I think we need to see in the same way. If you Google craftivism, you'll see lots of different approaches, from yarn bombing, which is more knitting around lampposts and different objects, to crocheting voodoo dolls of world leaders, which is not very gentle, and I wouldn't encourage that. It's very polarizing. But both of them are craftivism, and you've got the history of craft used for politics with quilts. You've got the incredible AIDS quilt, but you've also got incredible small appliques from Chile that were made during the Pinochet dictatorship, often by women grieving their missing men in their communities. And some of those small appliques were actually smuggled out of Chile during the dictatorship, that Amnesty International then used as evidence to say what was happening in that country. So I always say, craftivism, yes, it's the word craft and activism mixed together. And some people will say, oh, that sounds cute and that sounds sweet. But actually, if it's done well, it can make real change in hearts and minds and policies and laws. And the way I do craftivism, I call my approach gentle protest. So it's always about protest. It's not just awareness raising. It's not fundraising or emergency relief. It's protesting against injustices, whether it's systems, cultures, behaviors, mindsets, but always in a gentle way. And I love the word gentle because I think it's quite a rich word. It's got lots of layers to it, and I'd love to unpack it with you all as well about what you see as the word gentle. But for me, it's about being gentle with yourself as an activist and a craftivist so you don't burn out, and threading your values through what you do. So practicing what you preach, not just preaching, threading your values of service in the community, of doing egoless activism, of how do we love our enemies, how do we love our neighbors, all of that stuff around emotional intelligence, and being kind to yourself where you don't do too much, you burn out, but you don't do too little that you could do more. And you'll all know that's a balance and act. But it's also about being gentle with those people that you're protesting at. So a lot of my work in the Craftivist Collective is you're always thinking about what's the injustice? What are the solutions to those injustices? Who are the decision makers involved in changing that problem into a solution? And then how do we engage them in a gentle way? So putting yourselves in the shoes of those politicians or board members or local community leaders or your neighbor who might have said something xenophobic. You're putting yourself in their shoes, trying to understand where they're coming from, often not always agreeing where they come from, but seeing them as complex human beings like we all are. And then looking at how craft can be a really powerful tool for mindfulness for the maker, for critical thinking. So using the process for thinking through uncomfortable elements of social change, using the comfort of craft. And then also thinking about gentle language, so non-violent communication, gentle colors, how to attract people into conversation rather than just screaming at each other. So it's very much about empathy to those you're trying to engage, that you might disagree with, and also, yeah, gentleness to yourself. So that's sort of an
Like that.
overview, and some of it's street art, so you might make something to put out in public. We've got some examples that me and Lindsay will talk through. Some of it's keeping objects for yourself as a physical reminder. Some of it's making a bespoke gift for a power holder to build a bridge with them as a critical friend rather than aggressive enemy. So they all have different objectives. And you can see behind me, some of you, so you've all seen my paperback yellow book. So in May, well, for America, it was in September that the big book came out. So this is the project book. So this is more for, oh,
Tina
Dina
got it.
has. Amazing.
Well, I was like, I saw it coming, and I'm like, well, I'm just gonna wait for this.
Oh,
We
that
were
makes
talking.
my day. So this is the project book, and they're not, they complement each other. So I'm not saying that as a capitalist to say buy both books. The paperback book is very much the stories, the methodology, and my journey learning how to be an effective craftivist. And then the handbook is 20 projects and case studies and all of the gentle protest colors, gentle protest fonts, lots of different voices. So they're there to complement, but yeah, the handbook's more for people who can craft, who want to get straight into the project, and the paperback book is more of the stories behind it. But the last page of the handbook is actually this, and it's the same size as in the book. And I don't know if you can see on my little camera. So it's canvas and it's got little eyelets in it to look like paper. And on a machine, I've done little rows of lines, so it looks like paper. And then I've handwritten my epilogue, and you can see how messy the back is, everyone. I've stitched the whole thing. So I'm just going to read the epilogue because I think it gives you a good overview of gentle protest craftivism, and I'm sure, well, we're hopeful that it provokes some thought and questions and comments and a good discussion because this is a book club. So it says, Dear Craftivist Collective, let us always thread gentleness through our craftivism. Use the comfort of craft to help move through the discomfort needed for personal growth. Let's craft our protests to communicate love, not personal attacks. Forgiveness as fertile ground for progress rather than holding resentment. Disarm critics. Instead of being dismissive, let's be encouraging. Instead of being an aggressive enemy, be a critical friend. Let's make our protests persuasive, moving from demanding to understanding. Instead of force, offer invitations to create solutions together where possible. We are countercultural craftivists. When society wants a hero rather than collective progress, do not succumb to ego-driven activism, but act humbly in service to the cause. In solidarity, Sarah. And then it says, kiss, 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 XXX, and a bit of thread left on the side. So that's my little overview. You can probably tell I could talk for hours about what I do, but I'm really keen that this is more of a discussion. So I'll let Lindsay come back in.
I'm going to throw one question, and anybody else after this, please raise your hand, come back online, just butt in, whatever. Um, uh, in the book, you do give a little bit of the background of where you've headed towards this. And as before the conversation, Sarah and I were before we let the rest of you and Sarah and I were chatting a bit about the time that everyone on this call is an American, so we brought in our British person to help us feel better about our lives here, and she. I mean, you write about Brexit a bit in your book. You write about periods of discord and where people are, majorly binary, and there's good and evil and bad and good and right and left. And what we have always found with our grandmother organizations and grandmother groups is that they're sort of against the binary, that they look for the in-betweens, they look for the gray. So I guess I've asked a very long-winded question to basically ask, like, what is what sort of inspired you to look for that in between and look for those spaces where conversations can be had in a more maybe productive, gentle,
Yeah.
simple way?
Yeah, I mean, well, I started doing it in 2008, which is such a long time ago now. But I started doing it, my background, I grew up in a very low income area in Liverpool called Everton. It's still the fourth most deprived ward in the UK. It was a very white working class area, lots of high unemployment, lots of depression, lots of hidden illiteracy. So it was quite a complex area, and then it ended up with lots of drugs and gangs and housing issues, and similar context to a lot of American inner city poor areas. My dad has just retired as the local vicar. He stayed in the same patch his whole career, which is unusual in the UK. And my mum was a nurse, and then she became the local politician because no one else would do it. So they all said, Jane, you do it. And she was part of the local community action groups where we were campaigning on local issues around mouldy housing and healthcare, on national issues around inequality. And also we were in the vicarage, I remember my mum forcing very not very flavoursome coffee that was fair trade coffee because she was determined that people would have fair trade coffee when it was still quite new. So a lot of our mugs in our kitchen were like CND mugs and campaign mugs. And so I grew up around, we had a beautiful image of Martin Luther King. When I was 8 years old, we went to South Africa to learn about the peace and reconciliation work after Mandela got out of prison. So I was surrounded by inequality in our community, but also this history of social change, of learning from incredible campaigners and very emotionally intelligent campaigners. And quotes about on my shoulder, I've got a tattoo that says tough mind and tender heart, which is a Martin Luther King quote that links in with wise as serpents, innocent as doves. So I grew up knowing that activism can work. When I was 3, we were squatting in social housing to save them from demolition, and we won, and the housing is still there. But from that early age, Lindsay, I was, most of our campaign meetings in our community of people of all faiths and none, and all political persuasions and none, a real mix of people. Most of the campaign meetings would be in our vicarage kitchen with people smoking like troopers in the 80s and swearing away. And I would be this curious little introvert listening and seeing lawyers come in who were given free pro bono legal work, and journalists covering it, and us getting MPs involved and the House of Lords involved. And so I always knew that campaigning wasn't just going on a march or having a placard saying you're wrong and we're right. It was always hidden meetings and talking about who are the decision makers? How do we get them to listen to us? How do we make this win-win as much as possible? How do we get them on side? Sometimes, how do we get them to think it was their idea to put forward a new policy or to change what they've done? And also with the faith element, it was always we always made sure that people were never demonized. So it was never they're the devil or they're a narcissist. We always tried to understand, hurt people hurt people. So where's this pain coming from? And there was a lot of violence in Everton and a lot of hate coming out and, lots of xenophobia happening. But we always were, I grew up sort of being told, try and understand the complexities of humans and try where possible to create the solution together and be humble and not make it about you. So then when I ended up working in the charity sector, mostly in international development, because I'm passionate about campaigning and activism, so I ended up being a professional campaigner for Oxfam and different charities in the UK. And more of the campaigns were very binary. It was they're wrong, we're right, sign this petition. Go on this march and say, do this now. And very simplistic. And at one point when I was a teenager, we had the Iraq war happen. So Bush and Blair having that happen. And it was a very unusual time in Everton because we had Iraqi asylum seekers, all men coming from Iraq to Everton, living in a tower block, in a very white working class area. So there's a lot of tension. And all of our lefty friends in Liverpool and in other campaign groups were very anti-war. And we had these asylum seekers in Iraq ask for sanctuary and they went on hunger strike because their landlord was treating them so badly. So even though they were practicing Muslim, many of them, they asked the church for support for their social justice action. And those guys thought that Blair and Bush were brilliant. And I was this teenager going, so you're happy that we went into war, but I also know that we went into war for lots of the wrong reasons. So I've always been challenged of there's normally not a simple black and white thing. Things are messy. People have different experiences. People do bad things for different reasons. So I've always been swimming in the mess, really. So when I worked in campaigning and I joined lots of campaign groups when I moved to London in my 20s for work. I just thought that a lot of the activism we were doing was not very strategic. It was very like just respond with your emotion, scream and shout, have a tantrum, but I knew that people wouldn't listen if you did that. And also it wasn't very loving. And a lot of the activism and some of the craftivism I saw actually was more divisive and polarizing than bringing people together. So I feel like, and we've talked about this, like intuitively, I sort of knew that I wanted there to be a space for quiet activism, for people to discuss uncomfortable issues together and grapple with them. And handicraft was just, as soon as I started doing it as a hobby, I noticed it slowed me down, it calmed me down. Most of my craft is hand embroidery, so you separate the threads. I immediately noticed I had shaky hands and shallow breath, and I joined so many activist groups. But I think it's changed now where activist groups are getting much better at checking in with each other's mental health and where they're at emotionally. Then you sort of wore your exhaustion as a badge of honor, and you were sort of praised for just reacting rather than being proactive in your strategy, just going, I'm going to do something and I'm going to do lots of stuff. And with the craft, because you have to do it slowly so you don't make a knot or break your thread, it made me very mindful of the emotions and the baggage I was bringing to activism, and it gave me time to think it through on my own to go, okay, where can I be of use? Where can't I be of use? And then at the same time, when people wanted to join in, I noticed that as a group, because we had the excuse of crafting, we didn't have to give so much eye contact to each other. People actually opened up more, and it created a much safer space for people to go, I'm not sure I agree with you on that, but tell me more. Because you're all in this communal space. I know now, after 15 years of like honing my craft in craftivism, I have instrumental music now. I have room spray that's like lavender and vanilla to make it a calm space, but not too comfortable that you fall asleep, but a safe space for people to stretch themselves and ask conversations with each other. I have tablecloths, I have flowers, I have grapes for people to share, so it feels even more communal. Even if I've got enough embroidery scissors, I hide some of them so people have to share, often with strangers they don't know. So all of those elements of craft is to create these safe spaces for people to grapple with the complexity of injustice and move from feeling overwhelmed and disempowered to doing something with your hands. And sometimes more subconsciously than consciously, it's knowing that you're not completely incompetent. With each stitch, you can do something. And that means that you're more confident to go, well, maybe I can make a difference. So in lots of ways, it felt like it helped with sitting in that uncomfortable place of things not being black and white, things being messy, sitting in the nuance, sitting in the how can I be loving to someone who's being hateful to me or someone that I love, and find a way that's common ground with them to challenge them, but in a loving way. Or how do I get this politician to listen and to empathize and to understand, but to still feel respected from me and not demonized? And it's holding all those threads together, really, that I felt that craft was one of the few mediums to create that slow, quiet, gentle form of activism. I'm rambling, so butt in at any point.
No, you brought it right back to my question. Okay, somebody, Deborah, you turned your camera on. Did you want to say something? Oh, Dina does. Dina's ready.
I'm ready. I have a question because I love what you're doing, first of all. And you mentioned towards the end your spaces. I had a space for 5 years, and it was more around using art and transformation and ritual and creating that safe and sacred space for personal development. And of course, within that, so in my art, especially when I'm doing it myself, I'm stitching in my prayers, right? That's what our ancestors did, whether they're from the UK or Italy in terms of mine or whatever. That's why I've gone back to my roots in fiber arts from painting, which is what I was doing. But all that to say, I don't want to run a space anymore, yet I'm feeling pulled after that shutting down intentionally 2 years ago. That was, when I was done paying rent. And but I'm feeling the pull. I'm feeling it really strong. So I'm wondering if you have any guidance, first of all, to kind of weave together that personal development with, okay, let's now make this transpersonal and take some kind of action, but without necessarily picking one cause, or because I am in a neighborhood that is quite concerned. I mean, it was a challenge. I mean, I had "You're a witch" posted on my doors and stuff from the religious peoples, the Mormons around here, or maybe not the Mormons, the other ones. I don't know which, but anyway, yeah, so I faced that, and I wasn't very out there, but I was in a public space. So, so I have a lot of people of all different political and religious backgrounds in this area. And I always feel like, oh, yeah, if I was doing this in downtown Denver or Boulder, it would be great. But I know that the mother put me here for a reason.
Yeah.
And so any guidance on that?
Yeah. I mean, I am purposefully a one-woman band, which sometimes surprises people. I basically make all of the kits and work from home. You can see all of my stuff. Um, and that for me, for that selfishly, that's for my mental health. I used to work for big NGOs, and it just does not fit. I do not work well in bureaucracy. I'm not the best manager at all. I'm an introvert, so it drains me. And my work needs to be quite agile. So I do some weird projects that I know then my ex-colleagues in national and international charities use it to influence their own work. So I feel like I'm of best use in that way. And so I don't have a studio. I keep my overhead super low. I have people who give me £10 a month as patrons so that I'm on the living wage, so that the work I do, I can pick the right work rather than work that I have to do just to pay the bills, which I'm really lucky that I have those patrons that support me for £10 a month. All of my projects, Dina, I literally have a trolley and I have a roll of my fabric that I've got printed. It's digitally printed, so there's no waste. You can see it in the book that you've got. It's turquoise, it's got flowers on. It's I often have to say to activism organizations, this isn't a luxury. The more you create a beautiful space, the more when people go in, they immediately feel special. So I have my room spray, I have my instrumental music that's all checked by a psychologist from Westminster University to make sure that the music doesn't distract from the cause, but it actually helps with the critical thinking. So making something multisensory makes people intrigued to join, and it just makes it feel much more, one, it's more memorable for them once they've done it with you facilitating it. But also it just makes them feel more valued than often when you think of a lot of activism type sessions, it's done super cheap, it's using post-it notes. And making space for doing that. And sometimes if it's a community that I'm already part of, it's a really great excuse to say, oh, would you bring some flowers from your local garden for us to have on the table? Or do you want to bring some of your thread or fabric that we could use? So you can say to them, like, I'd really love you to come with your wildflowers, or I'd really love you to bring those cakes that I love the taste of. So they've got a reason for them to be there. Often people need a reason to be there. But then when it comes to actually doing the workshops, and it could be 4 people around a table in a cafe, it could be 10 cabaret tables where you've got 80 people in a local town hall. It's really, you could do it whatever way fits your context. But I like what you said about not making it, having it more linked in with personal development and not issue specific. So all of my projects are different. Some of them are to support particular campaigns, like Fashion Revolution or Amnesty or the Climate Coalition. Some you link in with your own campaigns, like our little mini banners that you hang up, you link to your own issue. But the one that came to mind when you were talking was one of the first projects in the book is these little footprints. So I just print them on canvas with silver fabric paint with a stencil, and then I sew around the edge on my machine, so it doesn't fray. But people stitch a message that is there for it's not an affirmation of I am wonderful, I am, those types of affirmations, which are great. It's coming back to activism of every step that I make on this planet, how do I try and make it a positive impact rather than a negative one? And what journey am I on as a citizen? So if I was doing it with a very lefty audience, I would say global citizen. If it's a very mixed political audience, I just say citizen. So some of the language is bearing in mind how people use what language they use in their community, so you're not triggering them. But it's a really good way to say, okay, as a community, let's think about individually, how can we be good citizens? How can we help our community flourish? This is a big thing, we're all exhausted and we might all be overwhelmed by life. So let's just, while we're stitching our footprints, let's think about, can I switch my light off more? Can I, use less carbon emissions? Can I be more ethical in some of my choices? Knowing that, I'm on a very low wage. I can do what I can, but I can't do everything in terms of being as pure as possible. But people stitch a message that relates to them. So some people have a line of a poem they love that it encourages them to be a good citizen. Some people, my one says, where we journey matters and how we journey matters too, ... Because one of my many flaws is that I can be fixated on a goal of, I want to change this injustice. And then I'm so fixated on the goal, I don't think about how I'm treating people along the way or how I'm engaging with the planet, for example. So by making it personal to them, and they keep it, so they take it home, they put it in a little frame, or they put it hidden in their desk to see as a physical talisman. But it could just be lots of words. Someone had forgiveness and solidarity on theirs. But while you're stitching it as a group, you can say, what did you put on yours? Tell me more about that. What are some of the tweaks you think you might do? You know, we're all on autopilot a lot of the time. How is this helping you think about what you could maybe improve on without beating yourself up? But I think that the big skill for you is the preparation beforehand is check the language isn't party political or judgmental or negative, and giving people space to challenge themselves, but in a way that doesn't, mean that they're beating themselves up, and
Right.
creating that space to say, well, how am I a good person in my family? How am I a good person in my community? How am I a good citizen in my job? And just keeping it open with all of my projects. I have 3 craft of thought questions, so you can bring people back to those questions.
Cool.
But that's one way where you can start at quite a general level. And then maybe they would have the confidence and be up for doing more workshops where you could say, what do you think about doing a project on a particular issue that we want to address? You could build them up to that possibly. But some
Okay,
of these
you got my
projects,
wheels turning.
yeah, I
Like,
mean,
I love this one.
the
I call
project,
it life affirming. Like, how do we make life affirming choices?
yeah,
To me, that's
yeah,
very gentle and can
yeah.
apply to self
And
and others.
because I work with a lot of museums and galleries in the UK, but also overseas, and in Europe, I've had to train my mind as well that, most museums and galleries are charities, so they can't be party political. They get people of all different backgrounds in. So I've had to be sensitive and train myself up in, if I've got someone in the British Museum coming from China as a tourist and someone coming from an estate around the corner, how can this project be useful for both of them, and how can they feel that there's common ground if they sit next to each other and they're sharing embroidery thread or scissors. So yeah, so I did the handbook and the paperback book to give those different examples of projects, but you can make them more locally specific to your context, or you can make them more broad. And that's where, as grandmothers and as grandmother adjacent people, Olivia, that's where your intuition and your emotional intelligence comes out. That, as a woman, I'm biased, but I'm like, this is where our soft skills and natural abilities of sense checking the room, I think, gives you the space to see what might be the right way to go. Does that answer the question, or just give you more questions?
No, absolutely. And putting together, like I said, I mean, I'm sitting in every space in my home is ritualized with
Yeah,
plants, with,
yeah,
sound, not right now, but so that part, that's what
you get that.
that's the
Yeah,
part that I do really,
yeah,
really well. So now it's like, okay, how do I incorporate
yeah.
these things? Like, I did do a project once where we were doing macrame Celtic knots, but it was a very meditative. So for me, it's okay, how do we move outward a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's the thing, is because it's craftivism, it's not art therapy, it's not just for the personal thing. So you can challenge people a bit to say, okay, the activism part of this footprint is that we're thinking about how we're contributing to society, what impact we're having on the planet. So you can use that word as an excuse to say, this isn't just about your personal development, this is bigger than yourself. And actually, we know from the World Health Organization that well-being is 3 pillars. It's being able to feel like you can fulfill your potential, cope with daily stresses, and equally, it's about contributing to society. So I feel like, especially in America, in the UK, I think the pendulum has swung too far of poor me, personal development, self-help, where we don't look outwards into society.
Mhm.
And then that can make us actually more anxious, more mentally unstable, because we're so focused in ourselves. So when you say to people, well, how does this fit in with society? Sometimes it actually gives people relief to not be thinking about themselves.
Yeah, there's an
That's true.
endorphin
And
rush
yeah,
too. There's an
And that is
endorphin
one of
rush
my
too.
activism pieces on the spiritual world of personal development is everybody's going off doing ayahuasca journeys and, you know, all this other stuff for themselves. And I'm like, but that is not what the indigenous people do it for. They do it to bring the medicine back to the village.
Yeah.
So I am I'm an activist speaking out to this stuff all the time. So that's a perfect one.
I want to note that Gigi, Toya Algarin has joined us. She just said resistance through art. And I'll tell you, I know she runs crochet groups all over Philadelphia. Deborah, did you have something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much, Sarah. You have introduced something new for me to think about. First of all, I listened to you, and I remember as a 7 or 8-year-old marching with Martin Luther King and seeing him on several occasions. And so I remember, you know, trying to make change and do it in a peaceful way. And I have to be honest with you, within my community, many of us have went into severe mourning after this election.
Yeah.
And I totally withdrew. And I was supposed to be having a 70th birthday party, which is in another month. And I said, I'm not having this. I am too depressed and sad. But then I talked to a young lady, talk about intergenerational conversations last night, and then hearing you today, then my birthday party is going to be part around this whole thing of craft and activism, because I feel as though I have to have this party because many women that I know have felt so disrespected. Let's just put it this way.
Yeah.
And that I mean, when you calling people stupid and all of this kind of stuff, no matter how hard you've worked in life, you feel like, well, what's the point, you know? Yeah. But now I'm thinking, what quiet way can I bring this language and using creativity? So when I was talking to the young lady last night, we were talking about doing vision boards.
Yeah.
And I want people now hearing you have affirmed that I will use this as a way to be gentle, but also this whole 3 components of wellness.
Yeah.
And challenge them at this event, my 70th birthday party, with this. So I thank you. And I guess my means is crocheting. And I don't know, I might even think about doing that or challenging people on that. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so glad it's helpful. I think for you as well, Deborah, is like it's making sure, so the gentleness for you is making sure that you'll feel supported. So for your birthday, what a great opportunity to say, I want to do this craft stuff, but I want to share with you, like, I need your support, people. This has been tough on me. This has been tough on you. I mean, so I often feel guilty that I live in London. I've really struggled in Everton as the vicar's kids, and I'm highly sensitive and introverted. So it was a very intense environment. And I am always like, I should be in Everton and I should be supporting my community, but I just can't do it. And I think I'm of more use where I am. But what I do is I check in with my community, let them know what I'm doing, see where I can support them. And I think if you're directly affected by an injustice, the first thing to do is think about whether other people can be those allies and to support you rather than you do it all and exposing yourself as well. So a different example, but I worked for one big organization where there was a lot of sexism, and it was from 2 layers of management above me. So so my boss's boss, his level, and it was a boys club, and even though it was in a charity, which you think, how the hell is this happening, it was pretty bad. Now I knew, as someone 3 rows down from that guy and his team, there was a lot of sexism with a small group of men, it was they were never going to listen to me about them being sexist to women like me. So and it wasn't good for my job. I could have lost my job, and it wasn't good for my mental health. So what I did was I found my boss's boss. So it was my boss's boss's boss. So my boss's boss I knew, and I really liked him, and he was a good feminist. So I thought they're going to listen to him because they like him and he's closer to their level, and he's a man. And he's a white man, and these were all white men. So I quietly had a word with him and said, every meeting we have, these guys don't listen to women. They mansplain, they speak over women. There's quite a toxic environment around parties. Like, you need to address this. I can't address this because they won't listen to me, and it's too triggering for me, and it's not safe for me anyway. So when we're in meetings together, I need you to spot when they mansplain, when they ignore a woman, when they say something sexist, and you need to pull them up on it in a respectful way that they'll listen to. So I gently protested my boss's boss, and he went, yeah, yeah, no, good point. Yeah, I should. And when sometimes I was in the meetings, I would look at him to be like, they've just done something. And he would either acknowledge it there or he would acknowledge it afterwards. And that's an example to say, and it changed the culture. He challenged them, other people started challenging them. They suddenly realized some of it was unconscious bias. They suddenly realized what they were doing. HR got involved. It wasn't too extreme, but it was a chance for me to go, I'm directly affected by this, but I'm not the one to protest them. So I think it's also what a great opportunity maybe to do your vision boards together and say, where can you, Deborah, protest, and where do you need other people to do it on behalf of you or in solidarity with you or as allies with you, and have those conversations with your friends to let's be strategic, let's not burn out, let's see where we can be of help, but don't take it all on yourself. And I love the fact that in the UK, a lot of people don't realize that Rosa Parks was chosen in her role. And you'll know this, and it took a while. They were like, who's the right person? And she didn't want to do it. And then she said yes. And I think, and I say that in the handbook, let's be clear on where's our influence, what's our skill set, what's our strengths and weaknesses, what energy do we have, what context are we in, and then decide what's gentle for everyone. So, where's your, how can you be your Rosa Parks, and how can you have the right people around you to support you and support each other rather than feel like it's all on your shoulders to do. And have a great birthday party. It's 70. It's a biggie.
Yeah.
It's a biggie. Yeah.
We have something from Toya Gigi.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. Deborah, girl,
Yeah.
you only turned 70 one time, right?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
you know what? Don't let that other party take that away from you. And the thing about this for me is, I understand how you feel. I'm not out here to like save nobody else no more. I'm going to save my own community, and I'm going to be selfish about it. I'm so sorry. But I also understand that pain, right? So right after that election, I have a crochet, I serve a crochet ministry at my church. And most of them are Black grandmas, Black women, Black, well, they're all Black, well, whatever, right? But we sat in it. You know what I mean? We sat in our pain, and we recognized our pain, and we fellowshipped and we talked our way through that pain. And then we start finishing making blankets for the underserved people in nursing homes. You know what I mean? So I also went to a conference. Now listen to this. I went to a conference, and it was for Black educators, because I don't know if you guys know, only 2% of teachers, or less than 2% of teachers are Black. And we know our children need Black teachers. They need to see themselves. So in this conference, it was like, I mean, it was great, right? They had how to teach, how to be a principal, blah, 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 all these different sessions. And the best one was the healing session for me. and we all got into a center, and it was people from like, you know, Muslim, Christians, blah, blah, blah. And we all got into this room and we just released.
Oh, amazing.
You know what I mean? And we sat in the pain. My pain was my mother passing away, you know, but I'm here at this, like I'm at this conference. I have a picture with Angela Davis. Okay, all those guys, like the Black Panthers were there. I mean, it was amazing. You know, like resistance, like total like revolution. Let's get it, you know, all of it, right? But just being able to sit in the pain that you experience, just like what you said, Sarah. I worked at IKEA. You can't get any whiter than that. And sitting in a room and being an older person at IKEA, and you know, knowing, having a voice, and then not like when millennials were millennials, them not like listening to me. So I understand. It's painful, you know what I mean. But like crafting releases that pain for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
For
Well,
me.
there's amazing stories, Toya. In the UK, there's a charity called Find Cell Work, and they work in male prisons in the UK, teaching hand embroidery to get up to a certain level where they can get commissions and they get paid to do the embroidery in their prison cell. It's one of the few activities they can take into their cell because it's small. And the testimonies are incredible in terms of the charity set up thinking this is a good business model. We help these guys make some money for themselves or for their family by doing this work. They didn't realize that actually the biggest transformation was by them using their hands in a productive way. Self-harm went down, suicide went down, confidence went up, anger management issues were improved dramatically, and all because they could sit and sew in their rooms and think and breathe and calm down and get their anger out using their hands productively and then share with each other. And this is, you know, big burly men in prison, some of them been in for violent issues, some for tax avoidance or whatever. But the testimonies from them of how handicraft has helped their mental health, their physical health, their confidence, their skill set, and not going back into prison because they then have a skill set that they can do outside. It's just incredible. So I always,
that's good.
people, when people say,
amazing.
"Oh, craft is really nice and cute," I'm like, it's transformational. It's incredible.
Actually, the reason why I'm late is because I'm just coming from teaching crochet to autistic children. And now we're about to go back in and teach to emotional support girls. And these girls, when I say they're mean, ooh, they're probably worse than those guys in that jail. I'm telling you, right? I mean, because they've been like sexually abused. They've seen murders. They've seen, and these are like teenagers. You know, they're not even in high school. You know, they're emotional support kids. So I'm about to set up a crochet club with them and have the grandmas. We're all the grandmas from my crochet ministry at church are going into this school, and we're just going to love on these girls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it sounds incredible. Amazing.
I'm just noticing that I'm so glad Gigi showed up. I knew she would love this. I want to make sure, Olivia or Carmen, if you had something to say. We've got 4 minutes. I wanted to make sure there was space for that.
I'm listening and getting filled up. My sponge is being rehydrated. So everyone has so many incredible examples of how they're living their daily life and giving of themselves. And it's very exciting to me to hear that. And so I'm just listening, taking it all in right now. So keep talking, y'all. I'm loving this.
Olivia, anything? I noticed you wrote something in the chat. Let me see what it was.
Oh, I haven't been looking, sorry.
She said the intentional use of language is super helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so my gentle protest language in the handbook is based on Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication and also just added to it in terms of context now. So yeah, and there's no right or wrong answer, but it's trying to figure out within the context what's the right language to use. So things like we don't use the word should, we use could or would, because should is quite a negative, shaming word. So little, and we often don't ask demands, we have questions, or we have ... so to make people more curious. So again, some of those like small things actually really helps with that nuance and figuring out. I mean, we've done campaigns directly to board members of particular companies, and we've researched what language they use, and we've used their language to get them to pay the living wage, for example. And by using their language, it means that it's harder for them to dismiss. So as much as it's great for community work and for personal transformation, it's also, if you're looking at trying to get a business to change something or a politician to change something, think about how you can, as much as possible, use the language that they use and to do stuff that comes from them. You know, what colors do they like? What language do they use? What tone? Yeah, always starting from their point of view rather than yours in an ethical way. I hope that.
Sarah, where can people get involved or learn more or get connected with the work that you're doing?
So I got the books, which are the hint, hint. You can get them in your local library as well. You don't have to buy them. And then I've got some videos on YouTube, and we've got social media, mostly Instagram and Facebook, so you can find me there. And then the website is craftivist-collective.com, where there's lots of free resources as well. So there's a free online course, there's a manifesto you can download as a giant poster for your craft group or as a little postcard, which is actually currently in the Design Museum in Copenhagen as part of an exhibition called The Future is Present, saying that the solutions to the world are out there, they're already here. So they got me to do a room on the future of activism. So that's there, that might be useful for some of your craft groups to download. Deborah, you could just have it on the table at your birthday party, and Dina, you could have it up in your little craft session. It's a 10-point checklist, and the World Wildlife Fund actually used it to create their own craftivism campaign in Spain to protect migrating birds, and they changed the law. So it does work. So there's lots of free resources online, and then you can email me through the website as well, and follow me on Instagram. But I hope this has given you a nice overview, and then it gets you curious to find out more. And all of the stuff I do, it is really about picking what fits your context and seeing, yeah, make it bespoke to you, your group, your context, and then just having a go and see what happens, you know?
Right.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Oh, I do see. I said thank you, so that would be the end of the recording. But Olivia is asking you again, what were the 3 components of wellness?
Yeah. So the World Health Organization say there's 3 equal pillars. There's contributing to society, which obviously the one I'm biased towards as an activist, but then it's being able to feel like you could fulfill your own potential, so not feeling suppressed, that you could reach there. And then the third one is coping with daily stresses. So not massive stresses like losing a loved one and grieving, but the daily stresses of life, of getting up in the morning, putting your clothes on, going to work. They're the 3 pillars of well-being. And they're all on the World Health Organization website. And I always remind people that contributing to society is a third of your well-being. So it's always looking out and not just inward, which it feels like in this current climate of individualism and all of that, inward looking is important for us to remember.
Amazing.
But thank you so much for inviting me to your book club. And I just think what you're doing is amazing. So do keep in touch. And I love that we both have the word collective in
I
our...
know. That's how we bonded initially. Yeah. We're gonna do it all together. We're gonna do a bit more with more people. So yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Good luck with everything, everyone.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
everyone.